Questionnaire will have a 5-point Likert scale that will provide responses to the close-ended questions. So I did a pilot study at Yetu Sacco in Kubu, where I tested the validity through conclusion validity, and also the reliability I tested through the use of the Crunchbank's alpha score, and it derived for all the indicators, the variables of social media marketing, mobile marketing, and website marketing, it was above 0.70, which is considered a good Crunchbank's alpha score. So, and for data analysis, it will utilize descriptive and inferential statistics, and also the data will be tabulated based on frequencies, medians, percentage, and deviations. So that's my multilinear regression analysis. So that's it.
Thank you, Kingori. So members, comments? Yes. Saidiana Mike.
Thank you for your presentation. Just a few observations. If you go back to your title, not the title, the research purpose, there is something missing in it. Read it again, you'll find it begs a further question which you need to answer so that it stands out as a purpose. Definitions alone cannot be your purpose. Yeah, because you're saying your aim is to define the effect. So that seems to be the focus, but a purpose is supposed to speak to the solution that your research is going to bring. So if you think about it, you'll find there's a further question that is being asked. So that, or so what? Okay. When you define the effect, so what? And then if you go to the theories that you have applied, you need to say something about assumption in each of the theory, because it's based on that assumption that you'll be able to communicate. To communicate, like, how applicable are these theories that you want to use? So if you can speak to assumptions behind each of the theories that you're applying, I think it will speak more effectively to your work. And then lastly, is on your research design. Your research design should be like, you need to speak like an architect. When you want to build a house, what's the use for the house? So there is
correction should come before the program that you release. And still on that, is that multiple regression answering all the questions, all the objectives? So you need also to look at that and also understand what you mean by multiple linear regression. Will it answer all the objectives? So you can look at that also.
So, can I comment?
Good afternoon. I'm Violet Kiende Muronge. I'm pursuing a Doctor of Philosophy in Business Management. My supervisors are Dr. Guyo, Dr. Ntongai, and Dr. Eric Moria. My topic is assessment of strategy implementation on the performance of climate change adaptation projects in Kenya. Now, there has been increased climatic variability and change over the years, and the repercussions of the changes are being felt more and more each passing season. Globally, various mitigation measures have been attempted by both government and non-government actors in different societies. In Kenya, the government and non-government have been supporting food security-related climate adaptation projects across the country in ASAL areas with a view of building resilience and cautioning populations against the negative effects of these changes. However, these strategies have not achieved the much success of the intended goals. Various food security and drought resilience projects initiated have not been successfully implemented to benefit the communities. The ASAL regions continue suffering from the adverse effects of climate variation and change, as witnessed by severely reduced livestock populations, frequent droughts, famine, and food shortage crisis. Even camels, known to be highly adaptive to excessively hot and dry climates, are struggling to survive. Sorry, I have some images which may be disturbing because they depict the current state in the ASAL regions. We have camels dying, dead camels, dead livestock, malnourished people, the struggle even for water, and a picture of a woman who lost her life and had the young one trying to breastfeed. So this study seeks to assess climate change adaptation projects implementation issues in the ASAL regions of Kenya, focusing on strategic implementation and the performance of the projects. The objectives of this study is the general one to assess the effect of strategy implementation on the performance of climate change adaptation projects in Kenya. The specific objectives are to establish the effect of institutional characteristics on the performance of climate change adaptation projects in Kenya, determine the effect of resource management on the performance of climate change adaptation projects in Kenya, examine the effect of stakeholder participation on the performance of climate change adaptation projects in Kenya, investigate the effect of regulatory framework on the performance of climate change adaptation projects in Kenya, and evaluate the moderating effect of climate change factors on the relationship between strategy implementation and the performance of climate change adaptation projects in Kenya. The hypotheses are informed by the five objectives, and this is my conceptual framework, which has 3 variables: the independent variable, which is strategy implementation; the dependent variable, which is performance of climate change adaptation projects; and the moderating variable, which is climate change factors and effects. The independent variable will be informed by 4 constructs, or 4 constructs will be discussed under that, and that is institutional characteristics, resource management, stakeholder participation, and regulatory framework. Methodology, the study will adopt quantitative and qualitative approaches using descriptive and inferential analytical designs. The target population will be 164 beneficiary households in Marsabit and Isiolo counties, where climate change adaptation projects were implemented. The sample size, the study will use Slovin's formula and derived a sample size of 399 from the target population. Data will be collected using focus group discussions, key informant interviews, questionnaires, observation, and secondary data, and will be processed using SPSS version 21 and Microsoft Excel. Data analysis, the study will use multiple linear regression models to analyze the data. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Violet. And I want to invite comments and contributions to that proposal. Welcome, members. Yes.
Thank you, Violet. If you go to your data, the section on your data, where it starts, just go back slightly. Not this one. Just go ahead where you have the focus group. My question is, this seems to be very qualitative. Yeah?
Yes.
But then you have SPSS.
Yeah.
But you've not mentioned any qualitative data analysis way that you'll use to deal with this.
I will employ Likert scale to convert the qualitative data to
quantitative.
Yes.
Yeah, you need to mention, because there's a bit of a gap, because when you look at SPSS, largely it's so good in dealing with quantitative data.
Okay.
Yeah. The same question I'll also have with you is on your design. Sometimes design is a very key section in your research. It kind of helps people to see the house that you're building, the type of material that you need, so that you adequately are able to answer your question convincingly. So if you can think about what you are saying here, it helps you to justify, for instance, why quantitative, why qualitative. If you think about your research design, that for instance, if you're using cross-sectional surveys, cross-sectional surveys gives you a type of data, or if you're doing longitudinal, and which I suspect could be your work, because you're looking at something that has already happened. Is an assessment.
Yes, and because it's an already occurred phenomena,
Yes.
that is why I'll use descriptive.
So you need a
information.
longitudinal design.
Okay.
Yeah, so specifying a period, and then within the period, you set out the data need, which data you need to answer which question. Yeah. When you go back to your objectives, you'll see each of the objective requires specific data, so for you to answer it convincingly. And once you've done the data assessment of your work, which data do I need to answer this question? Which data do I need to answer this question? Then you come and come up with your research design.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other person?
Just one small thing, very small indeed,
Yeah.
but very vital. When we are using pictures or pictorial presentations
Yeah.
of people, it's always ethical or ethically very important to cover the faces. You can use for animals, but when you have to use a person, you have to cover the face.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other? So if we don't have any other, thank you, Violet. And I think that was the last presenter from the School of Business. I think now we move to so now we move to water, sanitation and hygiene. And I will invite that is Dr. Dorothy and Dr. Vitalis. Welcome. Can we clap for them as they come? And also let's clap for the other presenters who have presented. I hope our presenters, you are ready. And for this session, because of time, we will call 3, you present, and then we will ask the questions after 3 presentations. So we will start with, this is Beth Njoroge, Beth Joroge, are you here? Then we will have Roba Kwabele Tari. Oh, you're here. And then the third one is Morira Susan Modoni. So kindly we start with Beth. You present. And then the others prepare immediately. After the 5 minutes, you will present. And then we will get comments for the three of you. So after you present, you can get a chair. You can sit. We can have 3 chairs just next there, so that after you present, you sit. And then the next presenters. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Beth. I'm presenting a topic, a paper in influence of environmental sanitation on the implementation of sanitation policy guidelines on the sanitation facilities in public primary schools in Meru County. So I did the research and my supervisors, Dr. Grace Gaki Mudhuri and Dr. Imbudha Charles Jati. The problem statement, the coordination of all the health-related activities in the primary schools, the sole representative responsibility of the Ministry of Education and other stakeholders that also include the Ministry of Health. And then it was noted that in a study that was done, that students avoid going to toilet because avoid going to the toilets because of lack of privacy, poor cleanliness, smell, and lack of toilet paper, soap, and hand drying materials. So as a way of introduction, 50% of the developing world population lack improved sanitation. Yeah, and also we found out that about 884 million people still use unsafe drinking water sources. And then decent sanitation must include hygiene awareness and behavior, acceptable, affordable, and sustainable sanitation services. So the objective is to establish the influence of environmental sanitation on the implementation of sanitation policy guidelines in the sanitation facilities in public primary schools. And the study was in Meru County. So the response rate of sanitation facilities after I did the data collection, 159 public primary schools were visited, and 72% had ordinary pit latrines, 18% had ventilated improved latrines, 4.2% had the water closet. So the research methodology that was used was descriptive survey design. And then I did purposive sampling was used to get the respondents, and the research and the tools that were used were questionnaire and structured observation checklist to collect data. The results. 91% of the sampled school had separate sanitation areas for boys and girls. 95.2% of the schools had urinals specifically designed for the boys' use, and 53.9% of the schools, there was provision made for the learners with special needs. 89% of the latrines were clean and free from visible feces. The hygiene of the facilities were fairly alright, despite a small number of facilities that had pool of urine. 75.4% of the latrine were lacking proper ventilation with no vent pipes. 93% of the school visited had clean environments which were free from litter. And 90% of the school had hand washing stations. 10% of the school visited had no water at the hand washing stations. And then in conclusion, there have been multiple cases of outbreak of diseases in schools. These incidences have shown how fragile and weak the sanitation procedures are in our learning institutions. And the study concluded that sanitation structures in school needs to be cleaned regularly. Recommendation: to ensure a child-friendly environment, there is need to ensure budget allocation on sanitation to adhere to. And then schools should employ sanitation workers who will keep the facility clean for the children to visit anytime they need. Thank you.
Thank you, and for presenting within your time limit. Kabale, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Roba Kabale. I'm a sanitation student representing assessment of eco-exposure pathways in low-income urban area in Meru municipality. My supervisors are Dr. Sarah Wandili, Dr. Josephine Mutembe, mentored by Madam Caroline Karani. Globally, SDG 6, which is focusing on clean water and sanitation for all, is unlikely to be met by 2030. This is because of rapid urbanization that exerts pressure on the existing sanitation facilities. In sub-Saharan Africa, 60% of the urban population live in slums, which is still growing. And in Kenya, there is exponential urban growth. Already we have around 15 million people living in urban areas, which is projected to grow up to 40 million by 2050. Problem statement: poor sanitation in Meru County, according to the devolution report, has caused an annual economic loss of 816 million. The sanitation, the treatment plant, it doesn't cover every area of the Meru County because of the topography. So private exhausters are involved in transportation and disposal without clear regulations. Also, this adds to a mystery of the disposal of sanitation products, sewage. So therefore, assessment of eco-exposure pathways is essential to aid sanitation intervention. The objective for this conference I covered was to identify major fecal exposure pathways in low-income urban neighborhood in Meru, and then to quantify the magnitude of fecal contamination in the specified pathways. Methodology: the study was conducted in Majengo slum. I used mixed method of data collection, key informant interviews, the mixed method including qualitative and quantitative, key informant interviews and transient work plus observation. For environmental sample collection, I used grid sampling method that was proposed by SaniPath for researchers to be done in the low-income settlements. And then I did laboratory analysis at the Meru University Biology Lab. For qualitative data, categorization and interpretation was done and presented in illustrative narratives in the report. Quantitative data, you analyzed using SPSS. I collected them with Kobo Collect, the mobile-based app, and then presented in tables and Instagram. The results, during the key informant interviews, transect walk, observation, and the water view, the 4 potential pathways were recorded. There were guidelines for key format interviews and also a checklist for the transect walk. So I discovered surface water, that is the river Kadeta, where most of the activities take place, like washing, swimming, and also watering animals. Then there are open drains in the area. There are also municipal water piped ones to the area. Others are leaking, so from the observation, from the interviews, also soil, because some of them directly are in the areas where drains are open. So those formed my 4 major pathways. After discovering these pathways, I collected the samples and took them to the laboratory for E. coli analysis, and these were the results. When you look at the first column is for surface water, those are the E. coli count, the colony forming units in each of them. I did a standard plant count through serial dilution. When you look at them, municipal water had lowest percentage, followed by soil at the bottom. The highest one was open drain, and surface water was also highly contaminated. And at the upstream, there was not much compared to the downstream, where the contamination was very, very high. The discussion, with high contamination downstream, in the river Kadeta, there is a clear indication that human waste are being dumped into the river. This one agrees with a study done 2018 in the Nairobi River that borders the slum in Nairobi. Washing also clothes, they may or may directly contaminate the water river because they also involve children's nappies that contains maybe E. coli. Heavily polluted open drains in the area. Pit latrines are being dumped from when they overflow. The population in slums usually is very high, so when they overflow, it is being directed to the open drains. The soil is also contaminated from not necessarily maybe open defecation, someone defecating in the open, but could be someone maybe directing the waste directly to the soil or the leaking sewage pipes. Also, the leakage in the water pipes has contaminated the municipal water, which has been treated at the MEWAS. So this one is also, in conclusion, let me conclude faster. There are 4 fecal exposure pathways as discussed. All pathways had E. coli, which intensifies that there is deteriorating state in our slums. Therefore, I recommend county government to invest in rehabilitation of sanitation systems to cover all the drains, because just providing toilet is not enough, but covering from maybe the disposal point, the collection point to the disposal point will help solve our sanitation issues. Thank you.
Can we clap for her? Then we have the third presenter. That is Mutiria Susan. So members, you can be noting your questions for each presenter. After this, we will have all of them in front, and we will give our comments. Anasieta Mwololo, are you here? Anasieta Mwololo. Okay.
Good afternoon. I'm Susan. I'm a student, Messi Sanitation. I'm presenting motivation determinants of sanitation practices in Tigania East Sub-County, Meru County in Kenya. My supervisors, I'll call that Dr. Ruto, Dr. Grace Modhuri, and Dr. Mr. Dominic Kiogora. In this, you are saying that sanitation refers to the public sanitations conditions which are related to health care, in that when you look at the sanitation, it protects human health by providing a clean environment that is stops the transmission of diarrhea diseases. It is one of the basic determinants of quality of life and the human development index. And we are saying that good sanitation practices increases people's health and the lifespan of people. The problem statement found that the Meru County government spent 816 million Kenyan shillings yearly as an outcome of inadequate sanitation, with the pit latrine coverage of 60% in response to diarrhea cases, as we have been experiencing of late. As almost a fifth of the children aged to 5 years, they succumb to diarrhea and related illness, which stands to second to pneumonia in Meru County. This study will cover the poor sanitation practices in Tigania East, Meru County. My objectives to assess the determinant of sanitation practices in rural settlement in a case study of Tigania East. The main objective, among many, I was working on this one to determine the effect of motivation determinant influencing sanitation practice in rural settlement. My hypothesis that is, there is no significant effect on motivation determinant on sanitation practices in rural settlement of Tigania East. The significance of this study will help to curb the outbreaks of diarrhea diseases that has been occurring of late. It will also improve the economic status of the community in rural settlement. It will also assist the policymakers in designing the appropriate policies towards addressing the problem of poor sanitation in rural settlement. The methods that are used in this study, descriptive study design was used. I collected data using housing surveys, observation, and forecasting group discussion with a target population of 72,549 and a sample size of 170,000 that were above 18 years and above. And in that case, I used the random sampling to get the household hands. The sample size was calculated using the Altman Formula 2019, and data was analyzed using the qualitative and the quantitative method and presented in frequency tables and graphs. And these were the result when I was looking at the emotion and social and the physical drivers that will determine the adoption of latrine. That is, you find that the latrines are available, but they are not being used. In that case, I was looking at the safety, the cleanliness, the privacy, status, and the pride and self-esteem. In that case, those are the findings. In terms of availability of water for cleaning the toilet, I was checking at whether the water is available on daily basis, weekly basis. These were the results. In terms of briefs were found to be determining the outcome, whereby in this study I was using the Sanford model of behavior change, whereby we are looking at the determinants like you have the practices. In this case, the briefs were under the determinants, and the outcome was the behavior of the people, whether they practice open defecation. In this case, you find that the briefs print a great law, and that is why you find that in waste disposal site for adult and children, yes, the latrines are available for adults at 68, for children at 50. You find that they are disposing their feet in the toilet. In the other places that where we found that the waste, human waste was being disposed, it was at bush, garden, they were fed to animals, and also compost pit. In that case, we find that toilets were being used at 100%, majority were 85%. The respondent that safety affected the waste disposal, and 72.7% also believed determined the practices, which was contributed by motivation factors. And at the end of the day, find that majority of issues were disposed in latrine with 68 and 50% for adults and children respectively. In conclusion, we are saying that effect of motivation determines influence the desired behavior of the people. And we recommend in this study that we need to increase water supply in the region and supply water storage tanks. Also, there is a need to increase knowledge and skills for construction of improved sanitation facilities, and also to strengthen the community and engagement in total and sanitation. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Can we clap for her? So very fast we can get the comments. You can give, maybe the three of you can come, Beth, Kabala, and Susan. You can just stand here as we have the comments.
My comment, thank you for the presentation. My comment is there are few, and they largely apply to all of you. For both of you, you had very good problem statements. They communicate like really what you want to get. But what is not, you've not utilized well your results. Your results are not the findings. The findings is what you interpret out of those percentages. Like when you say 70% of people use toilet, what does that mean? When you ask yourself that question, the meaning you draw from it should be the finding, not the percentages that you find, the quantitative. It's the interpretation. And even in the discussion, that's the points that you have to think. And this is where you take your position, your thesis. Your thesis is in the interpretation of those percentages, but not just leaving them, because the question is, what do they mean? Yeah? If you present it's like you are polling people on a particular issue, and you find that a large majority of people agree with a certain position, and that position has the effect on certain things. So as a researcher, you have to ask yourself, what does it mean when you have, like say you have the Likert scale, and you have people in the neutral, yeah? There's and I think two of you had those in your research. So you have to ask yourself, how do you interpret the neutral? People who are in the middle. You're asking them whether they wash their hands when they go to after toilet, and they poll themselves neutral. What does it mean? Yeah? From a health perspective and sanitation, these neutral people who don't want to say whether they agree or not agree, what does it mean? And especially if you find that there's a larger group. And the tendency in most research I've seen is people to only focus on the larger numbers. Like if you are polling people on whether they wash their hands, and you find that 70% wash their hands, we tend to focus on the 70% and we forget the 30%. What does that 30% mean in your own words? If you describe that, that will be your contribution to the research that you are doing. So please, if you can look at your results and ask yourself, go back to the objectives and ask yourself, what do these results mean against the objective that I set before myself to find out? Thank you.
Any other contribution, question, or comment? If there is none other, kindly you can take the comments and improve your work. Thank you. You can have your seats. Do we have Jemima Sibonge here? You are next, so kindly you can be coming. Then we have Eric Kiprono. Eric Kiprono, you follow after Jemima. And then we will have Hilda Kirote. You'll be the third one, in that order. 5 minutes.
Okay, good afternoon. This is Jemima Sibonje, and I'm covering bioconversion of fecal and kitchen waste using black soldier fly, focusing more on mass balance. Globally, sanitation is a human right. However, we have 3.6 billion people lacking access to safely managed sanitation. And this has left about 2.7 people depending on on-site sanitation. And this causes fecal sludge management challenges. And that's why there's need for us to come up with innovative resource-based technologies in fecal sludge management. And one of these technology is the black soldier fly technology, which has been proven to be sustainable in management of waste, as to some point it yields value-added products rich in protein and fat, and that promotes the circular economy. However, the technology is still at a pilot stage, and there's need for further research. This being a part of the wider project focusing on the BSF applicability in management of waste, I focus on the flow of energy. This is to help us understand what goes into the technology and what comes out. And the study objective was to determine the mass balance, which is still the flow of energy. To understand that, the experiment was set up. That's a quantitative laboratory experiments using the fecal waste and kitchen waste, each 500 grams, using 3 grams of 6-day-old, which was total in number 644 larvae. And I also analyzed the pH of these samples to just make sure the samples were palatable for the growth of BSF. And I collected the substrates at the interval of 2 days. This is to limit the disturbance of the larvae as they grow. And I monitored the experiment up to 50% maturity. That's when the larvae turns into prepupa. And I did the protein content of both the substrate and the larvae across the treatment process. The results, the mass balance model separates the feed into the residue, the harvested biomass, and the mass that has been used for homeostasis. Now, out of the 500 grams, there was 70.43 grams of larvae of harvested biomass from fecal waste and 56.77 grams of harvested biomass from kitchen waste. And the residue was from fecal was 100.43, and the residue for kitchen waste was 28.9. There were some parameters that were also could help us understand this mass balance, and that was the feed conversion rate, which was determined from the total feed consumed over the total weight, the BCR, which is the bioconversion rate, reliable yield over total field times 100, the survival rate, and also the ECD, which is the efficiency of feed digested. Now from the diagram, both fecal waste and kitchen waste were suitable substrates for the growth of black soldier fly, as the survival rate was was high. Then the prepupa yield was 70.3 on fecal and 56.7 on kitchen waste. Waste reduction was still high on both. However, kitchen waste was reduced more. And when we consider the BCR, fecal waste had higher. The feed conversion rate also was higher in fecal waste. And in general, when we have a higher bioconversion rate, a higher efficiency of digested feed, and lower FCR. That means the substrate was, there was good reduction efficiency on the substrate. And there was also a factor of larva weight, where the larvae were monitoring how they gained weight on both the substrate, and they both grew on the substrate, on both substrates. However, there was a pickup. Fecal waste reached its peak of 1.46, and kitchen waste had its peak of 1.66. This was the fluctuation of protein content in the substrates. They both, kitchen waste, fecal waste had 29.21, and kitchen waste had 17.52, and they were reducing from day one to the last day. Now I did the correlation of how this substrate correlated with the nutrients in the substrate correlated with the larva weight, and the correlation was weak. That's because the R squared is below 0.4, and also the direction of the relationship is inverse, because the nutrients in the waste were reducing as the larvae gained their weight. In conclusion, I conclude that BSF technology is suitable and a potential option for fecal treatment and management. And also, I conclude that both substrates were palatable for the BSF growth. However, fecal waste performed well with the conversion, the yield, and the digestibility. Yeah, I recommend large-scale experiments to using a high amount of waste, and also ways to increase nutrients solubility in substrates with high amount of polymers. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening. Okay, that's my topic. It's a paper. I was focusing on political economy analysis, so I extracted this paper that will be due for publications. So I'm Eric Kipruna Cheruyot from the Department of Civil Engineering, and those are my supervisors, Dr. Joy Riungu and Dr. Lillian Moria. So, okay. So my topic was building on an SDG 6.2, that's improving access to safely managed sanitation. And you find that in sub-Saharan Africa, 17% of the population are connected to sewer system, leading to that health and safety risk. That's according to Scott et al. 2016 and WHO. To counter that, possible interventions have been taken to address that challenge. And however, you find that upscaling these technologies has been challenging, especially in this informal settlement. Therefore, this study was carried out to identify the role of formal and informal actors in fecal sludge management. So the methodology, this study employed a case study design. I think it's quite different with what my colleagues have presented for quantitative aspect, whereby I was using a key informant, interviews, and focus group discussions. My sample size, I did not compute sample size priori, but I used arrays formula to focus for those focus group discussions, the number for those focus group discussions, and floors and lacking 209 to know the exact number of the people in the focus group discussions. The data collection, I collected data through the key informant interviews, whereby I was recording an FGD, whereby I keep it confidential and secure through net. Also, for analysis, I carried out a thematic analysis using NVivo, and it used guidelines that was developed by Robson and Catan 2016. These themes emerging from thematic analysis from NVivo, I triangulated it with literature from Ferguson et al. 2021 and Mallory on the political economy, whereby to agree for a mutual agreement. And these are the findings. These are the actors. The landlords, the mechanical and manual PTMTs, they perform daily routine of hygiene, toilet exchange for the case of the toilets, in this case the CBS toilets, container-based sanitation from Synergy. These operators also are emptying these toilets on a daily basis, and they were transporting to transfer stations. And also these operators also are supplying sodas to these container-based sanitation toilets. The recurring theme among these manual and mechanical operators, the interviewed asserted that there are cartels who control these services, the provision of these water and sanitation services, because you find that you must access water for you to access some of these toilet technologies. The Nairobi Water and Sewerage Company also is another actor and was responsible for sanitation and water connection system. However, we find that they complain of issue of devolution after 2010 constitutions. Some of the sanitation functions were retained in the national government, and also they found that there were reluctance in servicing of these loans due to that governance issue. Also, they expressed that there was lack of political will and support and interest among the politicians or the political actors. Also, that you find that among these actors, there are overlapping of functions in water sanitation between the three ministries. There's the Ministry of Water, Ministry of Health, and Ministry of Environment and Forestry, which affects these sanitation services. Also, there was no direct linkage between the Ministry of Water, Sanitation and Irrigation and the Ministry of Environment and Forestry regarding the regulations of function regarding the discharge, the issue of NEMA. Also, NEMA carried out a self-regulation and compliance assistance to ensure that these facilities, sanitation facilities, needed to comply with the regulations. Also, NEMA carried out an regulatory wave whereby they found that the regulations, the enforcing was failing. So they ensured that this non-regulatory wave was implemented to upscale the regulation, the regulatory approach in dealing with the discharge. So most of the water hacks have had loans also from international partners, but you find that the county government is lacking, don't want to service this loan after now the evolution. The UN Habitat and other actor was engaged also in multi-stakeholders forum and delivery of this sanitation service in this informal settlement. We have also another actor, Vehicle Sludge Management Alliance, engaged in capacity building, whereby they are educating most of these vehicle sludge operators. That's the same actor. They engage in targeted subsidies for these users, and they're also maintaining this sanitation infrastructure. It's a continuation. The African Development Bank, another actor, was involved in a project called African Urban Investment Fund. And the NEMA carried out a public-private partnership to promote the use of wastewater treatment technology. Another actor was the public health officers. Their role was charged with enforcing and coordination, but they complained that the act, this Public Health Act, had low fines. So you find that people kept on repeating the same mistake because the fines were low. So this is a discussion section of the paper. You find that if you've seen that the vehicle sludge already reported that government played a limited role in provision of these services. And this finding agrees with Mansour et al. 2017, who found that two levels of government were not adequately addressing the sanitation needs. That's the national and the county government. Also, we find that there were overlapping mandates between the NEMA, the Water Service Regulatory Board, Water Service Boards, and Public Health Officer in enforcing, as you've seen. This finding also agrees with Faxon et al. And Mansour et al. 2017. We see there is fragmented regulatory and enforcement approach between Public Health, Water Service Board, the NEMA. This is a continuation. We find that the Ministry of Water and Sanitation identified the essential role also of innovative financial mechanism. This agrees with a study by Okot et al. Find that there is a post-construction incentive that they incentivize this infrastructure. I think I'll move to conclusion. So this study concluded that the government for sanitation was inadequate and fragmented, as we've seen different actors enforcing and regulating the same activity. The three ministries, Ministry of Water Sanitation, and Ministry of Health and Ministry of Forestry, had conflicting roles. We have also seen that the operators express existence of cartels who control this, the provision of this water and sanitation service. Also, we've seen the NEMA, this National Environmental Management Authority, express the role of self-regulation and compliance assistance in ensuring that the facilities comply with their recommendation. The study recommends that we need to increase investment in sanitation services and infrastructure. We need also to strengthen regulation and enforcement. This body of NEMA, WASHREP, and should collaborate or harmonize their effort. The study also recommends that we should also enhance coordination and collaboration between these key actors and stakeholders, and also explore innovative financing mechanisms, there's targeted subsidies, user fees, and public partnership. We should also be able to promote public-private partnership. Thank you. That's the last. Those are my references.
Good evening. I'm Hilda Mbatia, an MSc sanitation student. My study topic was influence of community participation on the implementation of urban sewerage system, a case of Meru town sewerage system, Meru County, Kenya. I'll do introduction of community participation, and the Sustainable Development Goals requires that there should be adequate sanitation for everyone by 2030. And a report by UNICEF in 2022 found out that there was 3.6 billion people globally lack access to improve sanitation. Despite the government's efforts to improve water supply and sanitation services in Meru County, the sewerage service has remained in limbo as the expansion of the existing sewerage system, which is already overloaded, has been facing objection. In project development, it is essential to ensure the community participation in all stages of the implementation. The problem statement, as Harry said, a report by UNICEF in 2022 reported that 3.6 billion people globally still lack access to improved sanitation facility, with 779 million from Africa. And also a report by Mutedi in 2019 showed that Meru County faces significant sanitation challenges despite effort by the government in establishing the sewerage system. Ignoring community participation on proposed sanitation system project may face rejection and take too long before completion, making the population continue to bear the brunt of poor sanitation. My study was guided by the 3 objectives: to establish the influence of community participation in the project initiation process on implementation of the Meru town sewerage system, and also to examine the influence of community involvement in project decision-making process on implementation of Meru town sewerage system. And the third one was to establish the influence of community participation in project resource mobilization on implementation of the Meru town sewerage system. The methodology, descriptive cross-sectional design has been used, and it incorporates mixed method approach. A sample size of, I used a sample size of 138 households selected using cluster and proportionate simple random sampling technique. I had passively selected Rwanyange, where the sewerage system is currently being implemented. And I did cluster the location into 2 clusters because it has 2 sub-locations, Ndiene and Kagijo. Quantitative data was collected using structured questionnaire, then purposively sampling of 9 FDG participants, where I did with 3 area managers, 2 CHVs, 2 community management committees, and 2 household heads. Then I did use SPSS software for analysis, and quantitative data was analyzed thematically. My results. The response rate was 100%. Majority of my respondents were male, and at 60.9%, and the female were 39.1%, of which it's common in Kenya and in Africa, where men are mostly the household heads. Then most respondents attained secondary level of education, and thus they understood the importance of community participation in the implementation of any project. Based on age, most of the respondents were between 31 and 40 years. On implementation of urban sewerage system projects, 73%
53% of the respondents had diverse views on whether the project milestones were achieved in time, where 15% strongly disagreed and 5% disagreed on the statements. I did use a Likert cell where the respondents were required to respond to different statements, and one was it's strongly disagreeing, and 5 is I strongly agree. There was a mean of 2.87 with a standard deviation of 1.18. On implementation of budgetary provision, 90% disagreed at the mean of 2.16 and a standard deviation of 1.04. 77% of the respondents described the project as poor and were not satisfied. On the first objective, community participation in the initial process, at a mean of 1.97 and a standard deviation of 0.18, the community was not taken through the project design before implementation. So it was a statement of whether they were taken through the project design and design before initiation. Majority of the members were not shown on how the project would operate. Also there, I had asked them if there was a statement on whether they were shown how the project would operate. And then I did have a focus group discussion, and one of the respondents backed the findings by saying only the chief and the sub-area were told about the project. We, the community, were not informed. We only saw lorries and tractors coming to dig our land. Lack of engagement of community members in the initial stage of the project increased the likelihood of failure of the project, according to those results. Involvement in the project decision making, 77.5 were not satisfied with the location of the sewerage system plant. That was also backed by a statement by one of the respondents in the focus group discussion. Then 61.3% reported they were not compensated after displacement. The correlation findings showed that reduced community participation in decision making minimized the chance of the project implementation to success. Involvement in resource mobilization, only 19.6% provided labor. That means the majority were not the local communities that were providing the labor. Regression results indicated that unit increase in community involvement will result to 0.507 increase in implementation of the project. Conclusion. Lack of involvement of community in sewerage project initiation process, decision making, and resource mobilization had a significant contribution to the rejection or failure of the Rwanyange sewerage treatment project. The study concluded that community participation in all stages of the project implementation was critical for its success. The recommendations. The study recommended that there is need for the sanitation development interventions to ensure community participation during the establishment of the project for improved ownership and acceptability of the sanitation project. The study also showed a critical of considering local resources for community projects. Thank you.
And Eric, welcome questions for the three. Questions, comments for the three presenters? Okay, it seems there are no questions for the presenters, so we appreciate them once more. then we can have the next round of presentations. So we start with Alice.
Jesse?
Okay, good evening. My name is Alice Mumali, and my supervisors were Dr. Joy Riungu and Dr. Dorothy Kagendo. And this was the research topic. Okay, the research topic I was working on, the pathogen inactivation from fecal waste via black soldier fly treatment. I got introduction. In a Sustainable Development Goal 6.2, it focuses on increasing the access to equitable and adequate hygiene and sanitation by all by 2030. So the indicator target is to raise the proportion of the population that is using safely management sanitation to a bigger percentage. Currently, it's estimated that only 54% of the global population, they have access to safely managed sanitation, and the rest they lack. We have recent innovations such as anaerobic digestion, vermicomposting, which have been developed and at a low cost that can be modified or customized depending on the region. And we have also the container-based sanitation, which has been thought to be the option for safely managing the waste when it compared to conventional sewerage systems, which are expensive to install and to maintain. However, the need for emptying and transportation of this fecal sludge when the containers are filled up, it has increased some of the operational costs that have been incurred in maintaining this container-based sanitation system. And also there has been an increased exposure, operational exposures to the fecal pathogens among the operators. As such, this study determined the performance efficiency of the black soldier fly larvae in an inactivation of the pathogens, that's E. coli, via seeded container-based sanitation model in Chiru. We go to materials and methods. This study was conducted in Chiru, which is a peri-urban settlement, as the CBS sanitation has been practiced in urban settlements. Also, the study sought to find out its applicability in a peri-urban settlement. So, and the study site also was selected because of its convenience to the university for the analysis of the experiments. And the laboratory analysis was done at the Sanitation Research Center. And household selection, it was done based on the number of people who resided in those households. This was to ensure that the waste generated was approximately equal. The UDT toilets, they were supplied by Asanaji, an NGO enterprise, which is trying to promote the CBS in urban slums. And UDT principle, it allows the source separation of the feces and the urine in sealable containers, which when they are filled up, they are collected and exchanged with the clean ones. And it's also thought that feeding this waste, the fecal waste to larvae, it has been shown to inactivate disease transmitting bacteria such as the Salmonella species and the Escherichia coli. And also the larvae, it excretes a dry organic matter which suppresses the growth of the bacteria. Seeding the UDT toilets, the containers for feces collection, before waste collection, they were seeded with the 5-day-old black soldier fly larvae from the moose rearing unit. And on the 3rd day after the seeding, the fecal sample was collected for analysis of the laboratory analysis of E. coli, and sample collection was done after every 3 days for a period of 12 days. And then after 14 days, on the 14th day, which is reported as the active feeding period of the black soldier fly, the containers were collected, all of them, and exchanged with the clean ones. We have sample preparation for pathogen inactivation. So after the samples were transported from the household, 1 gram of the sample from each household, the 3 household, was transferred to a sterilite tube containing 10 ml of sterilite distilled water. And this sample, it was mixed with the water and shaken thoroughly, and to make a final volume of 10 ml. And we had 5 such tubes, and to the second tube containing the 9 ml of sterilized water, a sample from the first tube was taken. 1 ml of that sample from the first tube was taken and transferred to the second tube, and the process continued up to the tube number 5, which was denoted as dilution factor number 5. With all the replication done for each household sample and the serial dilution, the inoculum was plated in trypton bile glucuronic agar for E. coli inhalation. All the plates were incubated at that 7 degrees Celsius for 24 hours, after which the colonies were counted. Only plates with 30 and 300 colonies were viable for counting. And the experiment results were statistically analyzed using IBM SPSS version 23 by conducting a one-way analysis of variance at a 95% confidence level. A p-value of 0.05 was considered as an indication for the variation. And these were the results. As you can see, the first picture is the plate of a greenish colonies, which is an indicator for the E. coli strains. They appear as blue or green after incubation, after addition of the TBX agar. And the second one is a graph for the E. coli log units per gram of the sample. And we have the number of days. We have day 0, 3, 6, and day 9. As you can see from the graphs, from day 0 to day 6, there was a reduction in the E. coli log units for households 1 and households 2. And only for household number 3, which is the green color, on the last day, day 9, increased a slight increase in the E. coli logs. And this was due to the result of using of the toilet before the sample was collected. As from the results, we are able to see that the ANOVA results, they show that the p-value was higher than our considered p-value, which showed that the household did not really affect the process, the treatment process during that period. And also the results from the graphs, it shows that the potential for seeding this black soldier fly in the UDT CBS, it inactivates the E. coli, or rather it reduces it to a minimal microbial load. This can act as an extra inactivation step for pathogen inactivation, especially when this fecal waste will be collected and used in agricultural purposes or purposes. The UDT CBS, it offers an active approach in human waste treatment, after which the sludge produced can be treated via post-treatment technology. And these results showed a decrease in E. coli up to 4.35 log units, which is comparable to other studies that were done by Paguero and Joy Riungu, where there was an inactivation of E. coli and the E. coli were almost reduced to non-detectable levels. This implies that the pathogen subjected to heat can be removed same as odor, and the residence time and high temperature can remove the pathogens. We go to conclusion and recommendation. The UDT, it allows simple removal and less harmful and safe handling of the fecal waste after filling up of the toilets. This enables post-treatment of the fecal waste using different post-treatment technologies such as the solar dryer, because the fecal waste is not entirely sanitized, or the pathogen is not completely inactivated from that. Moreover, the technology, it provides an opportunity to develop the value chain for recycling the human waste for agricultural purposes, and it allows the safe disposal of the byproducts. The recommendation, there is a need to encourage sanitation and public health ministers or ministries and the policymakers to include this container-based sanitation into their options, and structural financing and public-private partnership to support the expansion of these CBS UDT services. Those are some of the references. Thank you.
The next presenter.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Onesimus, and I'll be presenting my paper on influence of social factors and status of human fecal management facilities on human fecal management. And my supervisors were Dr. Lillian, Dr. Ankanata, and Glyceriod. So despite the SDG 6.2, which target globally, or only that 9% of the human feces is severely managed. Globally, around 2.9 billion of people have no technology for safe human excreta management. This is according to WHO report of 2017. In Africa, 50% of traditional toilet and 8%, in Africa, 50% of the population use traditional toilet, and 8% have no access to this toilet. Taboos, education level, culture norm, and age, and also the gender affect how people manages human fecal matters. And condition of facilities such as lighting, privacy, and location also influences acceptance and usability of these facilities. Okay, according to under a tale of 2022, there are many efforts which have been made to improve sanitation access globally, concern which persist on regarding on reliance on on-site systems and the prevalence of inadequate facilities and lack of proper management or mechanisms. My problem statement was although SDG 6.2 target on to stop open defecation and ensures access to basic sanitation and hygiene, still it remains a challenge. WHO, in collaboration with countries like Sub-Saharan African countries like Kenya, have joined together to improve sanitation and end open defecation, although the goal have not yet been met or the expected outcome have not been held. 46% of Kenyan use fecal management facility that not promote safe excreta disposal. 9% practice open defecation, exposing them to diseases like cholera. Influence of social factors and status of sanitation facility on fecal management has received research attention. And my objective was to examine the influence of social factors and status of fecal management facility on human fecal management in Changamwe sub-county in Mombasa County. My study methodology, I use convergent mixed method whereby two types of data was collected, the qualitative and quantitative data. Study site was in Changamwe sub-county, Mombasa County. I took a sample size of 397 samples. Cluster sampling for area, proportional sample random sampling for households, and purposive for focus group discussions. In my finding, more females, which accounted to 54.6%, were women more than men, and this was attributed to being the coastal region, attributed to dominance of Islam, whereby I practice polygamous. Majority of the respondents were around 87.6% were who aged above 30 years. Suppose all sample participants were retreat, showing that they understand the questions and provided varying responses. Majority of the respondents were around 4 in those households. The population in those households, the ranges in between 4 to 7 members, implying high volume of fecal waste, which is generated and putting great strain on existing sanitation systems. A descriptive analysis was conducted, and means and percentages were found, and at a mean of 4.21, toilets were available, and at a mean of 3.746, toilets were usable, and at a mean of 3.561, open defecation was practiced, and at a mean of 3.217, disposal of human fecal management was moderately done. Inferential statistics was also analyzed using Pearson correlation coefficients, whereby availability of toilet where R represent level of significance. We understand that there was a high, strong, positive association in between status of fecal management and social factors and human fecal management, where R was at 0.98, availability of facilities and open defecation, where HARA was at 0.945, very strong positive correlation. Availability of the facility and disposal were at R at 0.501, which was moderately influenced. Distance and use of toilet was at R 0.501, distance at 0.00221, maintenance at 0.829, maintenance at 0.417, and maintenance and open education at 0.600. This is a table of inferential statistics, social indicators of social factors vis-a-vis my independent variable, indicators of independent variable, which is human fecal management. Okay, that continues. Status of fecal management, indicators of status of fecal management vis-a-vis my independent variable. and indicators of independent value, which were use of toilet, open defecation, and excreta disposal. In conclusion, education and belief have a great influence on use of toilets and disposal of excreta and open defecation. Gender does not greatly influence human fecal management according to the finding. Availability, distance, and maintenance of all associated strongly with use of toilet, disposal of excreta and open defecation. Fecal management in Changamwe was generally poor in reference to my findings. And my recommendation were the government of Kenya, national government, should focus on promoting education initiative to improve toilet utilization. The intervention should address on specific barriers and motivations related to age and belief for each fecal management practices. Public health officers to implement and adopt awareness campaign on importance of proper fecal management, appropriate fecal management practices, and risk associated with open defecation. The county government need also to invest on development and improvement of sanitation infrastructure. This includes toilet, public toilet, particularly in areas where access to it is limited. Thank you.
As we have the next presenter, who is Sylvanus McAll. So we urge you to keep your questions, your comments for the presenters. So we're having one more presentation before we have the questions and comments.
Good evening, everyone. My topic is on the influence of economic factors on fecal emptying, conveyance, and disposal. And mine was a case of Meru slums. When we talk of safe emptying, conveyance, and disposal, which is the service chain, we realize that it is essential in management of fecal sludge, especially in developing countries. However, there have been a challenge due to the increase of population in unplanned urban settlement. That is the case of slums. So in the Sustainable Development Goal, as we know, the sanitation aspect, which emphasizes on sanitation, but this has been a challenge due to a number of, sorry for that. So I'll move to my problem statement. We realize that access to sanitation, especially according to the Sustainable Development Goals, it is essential for everyone, and we leave no one behind. But due to the challenge of unplanned urban settlement, for a case of slums, we realize due to unplanned urban population and also the aspect of poor sanitation, there is a gap and there is a need in maintenance of hygienic sanitation in the ways of emptying, conveyance, and disposal. But the solution provided, especially for the government, that also majorly focus on the conventional aspect, whereby they use the sewerage, it is not addressing the challenges in the slums. So the health of residents could remain in danger if we don't implement this sustainable sanitation through improved approaches. So my objective of the study was to establish the influence of economic factor on fecal emptying, conveyance, and disposal in Meru slums. And I used a convergent mixed method research design. In the slums, I had the Mjini, Majengo, and Shauri as my strata. Then I obtained a sample of 236 participants from the Yameni formula, but of which I administered 288 structured questionnaires. And also for the qualitative, I had the focus group discussions, which involved 2 household heads, 5 pit operators, and I had a public health officer
So the qualitative data was analyzed using SPSS and also presented in descriptive and inferentials. And for the qualitative one, I used in vivo software and also the result presented in narrative. So my results, response rate was 100%, with majority of my respondents who are about 30 years, of which for this is in line with the African setup, whereby we know perhaps by at 30 you should be having family. So most of my household heads were 30 years and above. Then majority of my respondents also were male, that is 55.7, suggesting that for the African setup, of course, we know that male are the household head and they make most of the decision in the house. That is also for the sanitation-related matters. Finding also showed that 31% of my slum dwellers practice pit emptying, of which they opted for the manual one and not the mechanized one, bringing the gap and the need for the study. 63.1% of the respondent also had family members with more than 4 members. That one depicting the overuse of the latrines vis-a-vis the population. So 69.7% of my respondent alluded that the act of emptying toilet, that is when toilets are full, was not easy, bringing the gap in the toilet design. So for my indicators, I had the willingness and ability to pay, which also majority of my respondents, 80.2%, indicated that they were willing to pay for the pit emptying services. But the rates is what was the challenge, as also alluded to the qualitative focus group discussion findings, of which majority also was in line with that. Concerning the level of income, that one, majority of my respondents, that is 52.2%, strongly agreed that the level of income determined the household type of toilet, which also was affiliated to the type of emptying mechanism used by the slum dwellers. Concerning space, we realized that in slum area, space was a challenge, and even the act of pit emptying, conveyance, and disposal was compromised because there was no space for accessing the accumulated excreta in toilets. So my correlation analysis with my dependent variable, that is fecal emptying, conveyance, and disposal, it was higher on the level in income and the willingness and ability to pay, despite also correlating in space. In summary, I may say that there is need to improve on the toilet design adopted by slum dwellers, because the toilet design also influences the type of emptying technique, whereby, according to my findings, majority of who are practicing pit emptying technology adopted the manual pit emptying, which is not hygienic and also which is not safe. So the economic factors such as level of income, operation cost, ability to pay, sanitation services, access to credit also influence fecal emptying, conveyance, and disposal in slum areas, especially for the Meru, where my study was carried out. So in my recommendation, I recommend a partnership between the county government and non-governmental organization to implement financial support in slum areas to move them up the sanitation ladder from basic pit latrines to improved type of toilet. Also, the Ministry of Health should sensitize communities on the need for hygienic management of fecal waste to inform better community sanitation choices on fecal emptying, conveyance, and disposal. Thank you.
Let us appreciate Onesmus. Silvanus, sorry. Welcome all the others to join you. Silvanus, you remain on the floor. So Alice Mumadi and Onesmus Kiambi. Then we welcome questions, comments for the three presenters. Comments from the audience.
Maybe I'll just talk generally. When you do your slides, I know most of you have not defended your work. When you do your slides, it is important that you make them uniform. When we see something that is uniform, it becomes palatable even for the readers to see your work. They think you know what you are doing. But when we have some fonts that are too big, others that are too small, then the first impression, even before you tell us what you have found out, we'll think of a disorganized person. So for all of us, let us be organized even in the way we do the slides. And then for the three of you, and even for all the others that have presented, personalizing research. For example, saying, Sibonje, I did. Just say the study findings. It was realized. You understand? Not saying our. Because when you tell us our, Silvanos, we will think that, okay, he's not giving us his work. Because we don't know these others who they are. Yet we know that research you cannot also do alone. So just understand the language of research. You don't personalize, just use other adjectives, but not to personalize. I must commend Silvanos because the way you are presenting your percentages, like saying that 8% indicating this and this and this. So you are telling us that 8% indicates this and this and this. Others have told us that 80% and that is the end of it. We want an interpretation of what that percentage is standing for. My friend Kiambi, how did you come up with 397? It would be interesting to know how you came up with that. And then again, avoid personalizing. And then my student, okay, there is something that I noticed. You stammered a little. When you will be going for your defense, make sure that all this is inside, yeah? So that you don't read. You tell the world what you have come up with, because this is work that you have done so passionately. It is work that you have done daily. It is things that you understand, yeah? Okay. Other comments, please?
I appreciate the presenters for the work well done, but to comment on something that I've noticed from the group and the others who have presented before them, the issue of reading slides. You need to talk to the slides, you need to talk to us, not reading word by word from the slides. So maybe next time you may need to improve on that. And Mark, you may need, I know you may explain to us how space is an economic issue. But we know that it's an environmental issue, but you know that there's something you want to drive, that space could be an economic issue. I don't know how, but you may need to explain to us how that comes to be. Thank you.
So let's appreciate the presenters once more. Then we'll have the next round of presentations. So in the next round, do we have Cyrus Mugendi? He's not around. Jesse? So we'll have Jesse starting. Do you have Batura? Oscar Mutai? And Alex Ngatia. So those are the next, the representatives.
Good evening. So we continue from where Silvanus has left off. We are looking at satisfaction of SDG 6.2 by non-resident student accommodations. These are the places where students who cannot be accommodated in campus go to live. So in that, the first thing that we have to do, we lined up the empirical data that was available, in which we discovered that the agenda intends that everyone has sanitation provisions that are adequate and enough, regardless of whoever they are, and especially those who are in vulnerable conditions, people in slums, people who are neglected, and the sort. In this goal, there is an assessment tool they use to tell where a population lies. The ladder, it's called a sanitation ladder. At the bottom, we have open defecation. At the very top, where we want to be by 2030, we have safely managed sanitation. As of 2020, only 27% of the African population had safely managed sanitation in their homes or wherever they lived that was apart from institutions. Institutions are places where they might work, places they might go to during the day. But at the end of the day, wherever the African population went at the end of 2020, only 27% of them had safely managed sanitation. In Kenya, it was worse, way, way worse, because only in rural areas did they have safely managed sanitation. In the urban areas, only 30% of the population had access to this basic need of life. Now, the difference with student accommodations is that student accommodations, they tend to share a lot of things, structurally, functionally. The accommodations are built in a way that the only privacy a student has is their bedroom, perhaps. For a higher levy, you might get a kitchen or something of the sort. And this has been corroborated by studies going as far back as 2012 to 2006, and we shall find some more. But in 2020, there was a study done by Ogendo who discovered that for you to get somehow better access of sanitation, that is campus sanitation, you had to put a down payment in fees or accommodation fees. If you didn't have that, you had to use non-resident accommodation. Non-resident accommodations, because they're being overutilized by many people who have many different challenges, have an issue that is common to everything that is shared wantonly. Damage, inadequate provisions, and some are even absent. So this study went out to look at these neglected areas, this population that has not been featured by reporting, by recording in the normal ways that are known to us, the JMP and the local reporting methods. So in doing that, the study went through data, and the data revealed that we had a gap. There was some neglect that had been for long going on, either nationally, locally, and it has gone unnoticed for quite some time now, because we have sanitation as a goal that is desirable, and we have populations that are entirely not being covered by sanitation or by efforts that are being directed towards evaluating sanitation coverage. The objectives were to go out, find these residences, the nature of sanitation they had, rank these provisions on the ladder, and the third objective was to, in a way, judge whether this ranking is going to be beneficial or indicative of anything positive towards 2030. The methodology, we have the basic methods. We went through clustering of the institutions of higher learning in Tigania West. From those clusters, we had to select randomly these residences, and so that our work is not biased by people from one residence, we had to limit the number of people responding to our tool from each residence, so that we might at least cover a larger proportion of the people that we intend to evaluate. The study found that 50% of the people who were covered did not have access to hand washing facilities, but the other provisions, okay, the study looked at toilets, bathrooms, water sources, and hand washing. All these were present except in hand washing, where 50% lacked these things. Toilets were being shared. I don't want to say obviously, but toilets were most commonly shared in these populations. The toilet that was most shared, as you can see, was the pit latrines. The cistern flush was a bit rare in being shared. And in construction, the wooden or earthen floors, which are always indicative of unimproved toilet facilities, were a bit rare. Only 5% of the population reported having toilets of this nature. Now, the discussion, as we might have a chance, communal sanitation provisions were the most prevalent in this study. The study found that these provisions were being shared in a large proportion. The proportions of sanitation being shared here were unhealthy and unsustainable, which might inform us towards Vision 2030 being missed if this is the trend that continues. So those provisions that were being shared, also to touch on what Silvanus has spoken of, emptying was being sidelined through over-design. You found pit latrines being sunk deeper than normal to account for the population that was going to share them, which is a method of over-design. So the implications of these findings show us that in as much as the population is already neglected in sanitation monitoring and reporting, they are the most in need of sanitation interventions. And interventions here, I mean sanitation provision. These are not people who lack knowledge or practices of sanitation. They need provisions of sanitation that are commensurate to their needs as a dignified population of Kenya and the world. So the study recommends, first of all, the schools, institutions that cause such settlements to arise should at least take some accountability to ensure that these residences have sanitation provisions that are worth having, provisions that are not dictated by rental access, but provisions that can be accessed regardless of economic, cultural, or any other backgrounds that might exist in the population. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll have the next presenter, Batula.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Batula, MSc student, Meru University. My supervisors are Sarah Wandili, Grace Gaki, and my mentor is Caroline Karani. And I'm doing a research on quantification of microbial risk associated with fecal exposure in a nomadic lifestyle, a case study of Torby Ward, Marsabit County. And the background information: the pathogens are normally spread through the skin. It can be through the injection, through the body fluids, and through the fecal matter. In Kenya, Kenya is a water scarcity country with 33 million people struggling to access clean water and around 19 million lacking basic sanitation. Background information: surface runoff and borehole water remains the available water resources for domestic use for nomadic community. And 50% of Marsabit County residents have no access to improved water, and less than 30 have access to basic sanitation. The main objective: quantification of microbial risk associated with fecal exposure in a nomadic lifestyle, a case study of Torby Ward in the larger Marsabit County. And the research questions: what is the magnitude of microbial risk factors associated with fecal exposure in a nomadic setup? The methodology, the study design is descriptive cross-section, both quantitative and qualitative. The study area is Torby Ward, which has around 23,000 population. The methodology, the population study is a Torby Ward. The inclusion criteria is strictly the community that practices nomadic lifestyle, and exclusive is agropastoralist. That's just a pictorial showing the water sources which are used by the community. The results. All the samples taken, I purposely jumped some of the things. I can talk about justification. There's limited research on fecal exposure pathways in nomadic lifestyle, and the issue of justification and significance. Open defecation is still at 66% in Marsabit County. They still use unprotected water at 34.5%, and surface water at 22.5%. That's according to surveys which are done in Marsabit County. So the result shows that all the samples taken from the sample villages had high E. coli to the extent, indicating extent of fecal contamination in water sources. Of the dominant is the dam water and the pan water with high E. coli. The table shows on this, it's a bit hazy because of the concentration. So we had 5 manyatas which were sampled in this area, and every manyata had a water source. It can be pan, it could be trough, it could be water tank. So all the samples, all the sources were 5 samples were taken, and each samples were analyzed, taken to lab, analyzed using dilution factor, and then counting the colonies. We realized that the pan water from Okola had high colony forming units. That's at 193. Then the dam at Torby Ward also had the highest at 105. Then the others, water tanks had some 5, because 5 samples were taken. Out of 5, around 4 could be positive, 1 could be negative, but the areas, the area of troughs, the dam, and the pan, all the 5 samples were positive, although with a different coliform units when they are counted. Then one of the other pathway was milk and milky utensils. In the milk, all the samples analyzed showed presence of E. coli, and the milky utensils also showed around 58% of the samples taken had also E. coli. And then it also ranged from Manyata to Manyata. In Torby Ward had around 21%, followed by Shur, and then the list was the Kuku. The utensils had similar findings, with Torby Ward having 21%, followed by Shur, and then the list was the Kuku. This was the finding in terms of the coliform forming units, the positivity and the negativity. The utensils had also a similar in terms of the manyatas. So if you take 8 manyatas, 8 from the Shur, you can see 19% of the households which was selected and samples taken. Out of 9, 7 of them showed positivity. Okola the same. The Torby Ward, the Torby Manyata and the Kambinyoka, you can see these coliform, the CFUs, they were higher than recommended WHO, which is 4 to 10 coliform forming unit CFU. In the discussions, sample collected and analyzed showed presence of E. coli, which is the indicator of bacteria presence, and water contamination. Surface water is the main source for this community. Use of water, surface water without treatment for domestic purposes and practice open defecation is a common practice. Conclusion and recommendation: the study shows evidence of significant dominance of E. coli in all water samples. In recommendation, routine surveillance of microbial quality surface water for domestic purpose, milk and milk utensils, and more studies are recommended to identify other microbia present in water, so surface water, for domestic purposes in this community. Thank you.
We'll have the last presenter, that is Oscar Motai.
Thank you. Good evening. So I'm Oscar Mutai, and I'm presenting on a topic on parametric analysis of sanitation technologies for fecal sludge management, a case of Eldoret Town Municipality, Uasin Gishu County. So my supervisors are Dr. Stephen Karanja and Dr. Dorothy Kagendo. So on the introduction, we have a report from WHO which shows that 1.6 billion people lack proper sanitation access globally. And according to SDG goals, in 2018, communities with adequate facilities may be exposed to excreta because of poor sanitation technologies. And the percentage of Kenyan population having access to safe water is about 59%, and only approximately 29% have access to basic sanitation. My background, so the research was based on the adoption of the SFD approach to identify the priority areas to be acted upon in ensuring city-wide exclusive sanitation for urban sanitation. So because of the rapid growth of the cities in Africa, so there's been a problem of providing adequate sanitation, especially in the low-income communities residing in the urban areas. On my problem statement, so we realized that the provision of the sustainable sanitation in urban centers require proper monitoring of sanitation technologies across the full sanitation service chain. So by the use of SFD as a parametric analysis tool, it will be convenient as adopted in this study. So the study presented the resulting challenges through projection of how fecal sludge management services are provided along the sanitation service chain. So my main objective was to analyze the key parameters of sanitation technologies of fecal sludge in Eldoret Town Municipality in Uasin Gishu County. And I focused mainly on determining the main sanitation technologies in the town and be able to outline the fecal sludge management by use of a sheet flow diagram. So the research applied a mixed method design with the incorporation of qualitative and quantitative methods. So it involves carrying out of observations, conducting interviews. The key informants were mainly sanitation professionals from Eldoret and Uasin Gishu County government. And purposeful sampling was applied on the key informants because they were the people who were not directly to be dealing with sanitation. So using the Yamana formula, I was able to come up with a sample size of 400, which was recruited from the 10 wards, and I divided, because I divided the sample to 40 samples from each ward to make sure that each ward was represented in the data collection. And the data was collected using the questionnaire and an SFD of urban sanitation checklist of the data was used. And the SFD software and the SPSS version 29 were used to analyze the data. So that's the map of the municipal boundary covering Eldoret Town. So on my further discussion, so the main sanitation technologies which were used are the user interface and the containment technologies. You find that around 47% of the people use pit latrines. We have 50% using toilets. And the open defecation rate was found to be 3%. So on the containment, the people using the lined pit are 7.2%. We have the partial lined pit at 12.8% and lined 22.3%. Those using septic tanks are around 13.3%. Free line tank 4.5%, and those connected directly to the sewer line was 40%. So the coverage of the sewer network in the town is 40%. On emptying and transportation, We have the people who are carrying out manual emptying. We have the motorized vacuum trucks, as shown. Also, on the means of transport, the people who are using the manual emptying, or you can say the human transport. Then we have the animal transport. These are mainly the use of donkeys. Then we have vehicle transport. They use the exhaust trucks. And those with sewer lines, which end up the sewer treatment around 44%. So on the treatment and final disposal of the fecal sludge, so around 20.3% were using composting. The treatment ponds were 8.5%. These are the decentralized. Then the centralized sewer was 71.3%. So those on final disposal, those who channel to open storm sewer drains, open grounds, and the nearby rivers was a total of 7.3%, and 15.5% were used for farming, and forestry was 13.3%. So on the outline of the fecal sludge by an SFD, you find that 36% of the fecal sludge is safely managed, where 64% is not safely managed, and the population practicing open defecation is at 3%. And on offsite sanitation, wastewater contained within the sewer was 48, contained and the rest of the sewer was 48%, but the one delivered the sewer were 46%. That showed a loss of 2% on the conveyance. On on-site sanitation, 13% of the supernatant was safely contained, and in which only 11% was delivered to treatment plants and safely treated. Then fecal sludge contained for on-site sanitation was 16%, of which 12% was not emptied, while 4% was emptied and delivered to sewer treatment plant and safely treated. So this is a presentation of a sheet flow diagram for Loretown. So as you can see, at the end there we have 64% safely managed and 36% not safely managed. So my conclusion is that sanitation is a collective responsibility of the key stakeholders from the community, government, and the private sector, and the use of an SFD as an advocacy tool for informing the sanitation service providers of the key areas to consider in safe handling of fecal sludge should be encouraged across the cities in Kenya. Also, sanitation service provision should be equitable, sustainable to the urban population, hence the conventional sewer may not always be the solution. Thank you.
Just appreciate Oscar. And now we welcome another round of questions, comments. So the three presenters, you can come forward. So welcome your questions, comments.
Maybe remind me the name. Okay, but considering that you're carrying exposure, fecal exposure pathway, how are you able to control other factors? Because I think that's another, maybe it has an effect. Maybe the distance to this, or the distance can play a role.
Possibly an additional question to that. There's something that you presented on milk contamination. And you said that all the samples that were looked into, they were contaminated. Maybe in addition to whatever he's asking, was the contamination right from the cow, or it was because of the handling of the milk?
Yeah, it was not a difficult, it was not an easy research, because I was doing research on 5 pathways. That was milk, utensils, water, and also flour. Although I did not save and say the result of flour because the result was negative. I'm told the negative result also is a result. So those water, the water samples were from the dams, from the ponds, from the household, which has been stored in the households. They're also from the reservoir tanks, from the boreholes. So I didn't know what you said by distance, but samples were taken from the water pans and then put in a cooler. Then we took it to the lab for analysis. But for the issue of milk, as we know that milk normally is sterile from the udder of the animals, but this one is one of what I presented is one objective. But the issue of, the issue of behavioral change, the behavioral factors that affect the exposure pathways among the adults, that's what I presented in Mombasa. So when we combine that with the behavioral, the study realized that they don't wash their hands when they are milking. The issue of there are critical areas for washing hands, normally going to the toilets and such, and then there's open defecation. Then when we analyze the water, the surface water which they normally use is contaminated, and they use this water to clean the utensils. So it's like this, in conclusion, contamination comes from the water source, because the water source is dominant in terms of E. coli contamination, and what has been contaminated because of open defecation. They are not toilets, because they are in the other objectives. We realize that 95% of the community do not use toilets. They do open defecation. So water, milk in the sense is sterile, but it's because of the behavior of the community in terms of contamination of the milk samples. Yeah, thank you.
So we have another.
Just an additional comment on what you have explained with contamination. What is the impact of that contamination? Maybe when you are doing your conclusions and recommendations, maybe you can add on the impact of that contamination so that the research can really be even funded, or some intervention are made immediately.
And then the issue of doing routine microbial tests. Let's say if this research was done during the rainy season, and during the rainy season is when they go and take this water, and they find that, when I was doing the thematic analysis, most of them were saying rainwater is pure, so the groundwater is pure, and we take it. It's like that water is pure, and then it's the only available water. So what I was recommending, and also as being part of the county government, we should do water tests on let's say, during the rainy season and thereafter, so that, and then we also do the treatment of water and advise them on when they take water, at least even at the home level they can treat their water, because the water treatment chemicals are available. We have a very robust public health department at the county level.
Thank you. To ask, what is being done about the open defecation, the 95%, you know that is quite high. So what is being done maybe by the county government, even as you give your recommendations, maybe you can tell us what is being done, because this is dangerous.
This research, has not been disseminated at the county level, although I'm part of the directorate of the county Department of Health. And I think this is going to be a good research, feedback in terms of resource mobilization from the partners and also the county government. But one difficult thing which I was also finding it as a recommendation, these are people who move from one place to another. Today they're here, tomorrow they are not there. So which part, which sanitation aspect fits this community? This is what we need to find out as a team. Yeah. But open defecation is there at 95%. Yeah. I think you people in the Meru University should be part of the team to help us solve that problem. Thank you. Yeah.
Because so that we can handle that. Yes, so that we can talk about behavior change, ODF-free varieties. You know,
yes.
You know, we have done behavior change and advocacy, which should start from the community themselves, yes. So that the change starts from them. We can mobilize and this will work, even if they are nomads, even if they are pastoralists. As long as the change comes from within themselves. Because I want to believe that with 95% of the open defecation, we have cases of increased mortality, which maybe is not recorded. These are the studies that should come out from your work, which you can go ahead with even in your PhD. And which as Meru University now we can come in and try to assist the community.
Thank you so much. In fact, I don't want to turn this one as to a lecture. What we realized in the Marsabit County, our gum rate for nutrition is very, very high, both for North Sub-County and Lesami Sub-County. And one of the factors which we anticipate, and which research has been done by an organization called Nawiri, is because most of them is because of the GIT infection, gastrointestinal infection, which normally causes a lot of deterioration, malabsorption of the children. So this finding, I think, is going to give them a lot of support in terms of management on how we can approach the behavior change. Thank you.
Yeah, my question goes to Okoa, or not a question, but a general comment about your title, the SDG target 6.2. I don't know whether that's the way you framed it in your thesis. No. Or it's a bit different, because SDG, it's a bit general or something. I would wish that you would have gone with the water and sanitation, which is what is spoken under 6.2. Maybe you can comment on that.
Yes, the SDG 6 is on clean water and sanitation. Then 6.1 deals with clean water. 6.2 focuses on sanitation. Then 6.2A, we have sanitation itself. 6.2B, we have hand washing. So the target for 6.2 is a target that focuses on providing sanitation for everyone by 2030 without leaving anyone behind, with a focus on those who are most vulnerable, those populations. So when I put up 6.2, I was looking at that, the sanitation for all by 2030.
If there are no more comments, any comments, additional comments?
Maybe to, again to my student, because I've heard nobody is asking you a question, so let me do it. When you are giving your data, I know you have not defended also. When you tell us 64% was safely managed, go ahead and tell us what that means. What does it stand for? How does it help us now that 64% is safely managed? And this other percentage that is not safely managed, what does it stand for as a result? How is it helping the community or the world? Yeah? Okay.
So let's appreciate the presenters and everyone who participated in this session. So we have come to the end of our session today. I understand we were supposed to have a closing ceremony here. I don't know whether that is still on. participating. So we'll ask someone to pray for us as we end the session. A volunteer. And today's overall presentations. A volunteer.
Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit